Hey, what's up, stock compounders? Brad here. So Charlie Munger did a Q&A session at CalTech on Monday, December 14th, 2020, which was just 2 days ago. It was a fantastic Q&A. And I want to share my highlights because there's just so many seeds that were planted during this Q&A session. And so by regurgitating them to you, I'm kind of watering those seeds. I'm helping myself really assimilate some of these lessons. And I want to give a shout out. One of my subscribers actually let me know that this Q&A session was open to the public. So I was able to listen in real time, which was really cool. And that subscriber pointed me to Monish Pabrai's Twitter feed, where Pabrai had shared the link to this CalTech Q&A. So give Monish Pabrai a follow on Twitter if you haven't already. A lot of good stuff there. But anyway, let's get into my highlights from this Charlie Munger Q&A session. Charlie kind of opened with, early life, what was it like at CalTech? He talked about how he had an army of children to support. And he really went into law because his dad and his grandfather had gone into law. So it was kind of following the family tradition. He says he underspent, right, his pitiful earnings. He didn't earn much, but he spent even less. And with that surplus, he invested. And he says he did quite well. Prompted by Warren Buffett, he decided, he'd rather work for himself than work for someone else in law. So that was kind of how he transitioned into a professional career as an investor. He sees that many smart people have gone into the investing field, and he really doesn't think that it's been a good development for society. He thinks, all of these smart people would better serve society in, fields that were, had more benefits to society rather than primarily benefiting those individuals financially through, through the investment arena. Over the long term, this was interesting. So this gets into Charlie Munger's idea that we should really understand the big ideas in, a variety of disciplines. Okay, so here he says, over the long term, companies in America behave most like biology. All individuals and species die over time. This is the long-term investment climate. Okay. He talks about department stores, newspapers, the steel industry. They're really all shadows of their former selves. Okay, so you get this rise and fall, similar to what happens in biology. He was asked, "How do you deal with change?" Okay, well, there's two answers he gave. One, you could get on the cutting edge of change. Right, this is Apple, this is Google, this is Facebook, Amazon. Charlie Munger has not made his money on the cutting edge of change. He's made his money in the second category, which is avoid change that is likely to harm you. Okay, and he talks about Burlington Northern Railroad and how Burlington Northern is always going to be around. I mean, not always, obviously. With biology, everything dies. But technology isn't going to replace Burlington Northern Railroad in the foreseeable future, right? We've got to transport goods around the country, and rail is really the cheapest way to do it. And they actually did utilize technology for Burlington Northern. Instead of a single deck train, they created a double deck train so they could transport twice as much, and they raised the heights of the tunnels along these railroad tracks in order to accommodate the taller trains. So that was kind of interesting. So his key has been finding investments that almost can't be disrupted by technology. And Burlington Northern is a fantastic example of that. He talks about how all successful investing is about finding something that is worth more than it costs, right? More than you have to pay. And that's really the margin of safety concept. He talked about how the most remarkable investment firm in the country is Sequoia Venture Capital. He's been so impressed by how they've really been able to just kill it in investing on the cutting edge of technological developments. He was asked how he deals with biases, right? Obviously, Charlie Munger, he did a talk at Harvard in the mid-1990s called the Psychology of Human Misjudgment, where he detailed like 25 different biases that humans have that really do not help with investing or just life in general. They make things harder. So how does he deal with biases? Well, he rubs his nose in his mistakes, and that helps him really learn from those mistakes. The second thing, keep it simple, right? The more complicated something is, the more opportunity there is for the biases to kind of creep in and distort things. So keep it simple. And finally, have a low bar, right? Just try to avoid being stupid. Charlie Munger attributes so much of his success in investing and in life to avoiding being stupid, right? Not trying to be smart like most people are, right? People want to be perceived as smart. Charlie Munger is really just trying to avoid doing stupid things, okay? And that's been such a key to his success. He says, sometimes he tries things that are too hard, and when that happens, he fails. I just love that. So it's just a reminder, if you're trying something that's too hard, you're probably going to fail. That's the whole idea with Warren Buffett's too hard pile when it comes to investing. If a company, if you can't understand it, if it's not in your circle of competence, it's too hard. Take a pass. Find something easier. So it's such a simple idea, but it's something that is easy to forget as an investor. He talked about Costco and how online is eating brick and mortar retail at a rapid pace. He says online Costco sales were up 86% versus the same quarter last year. Probably a fair bit of that has to do with the pandemic. People are less excited to actually go into the physical store. But it wouldn't surprise me if, the pandemic was that nudge for people to, order from Costco online. It wouldn't surprise me if they don't go back to the actually visiting the retail stores. So it's been this incredible catalyst to really push people online, in my opinion. He was asked about, what impact the pandemic is going to have a year, 2 years from now. What's our society going to look like? What's going to be different? And of course, Charlie said he didn't make his fortune by predicting macro changes better than anyone else. He and Warren Buffett had a very simple formula. They bought things that were promising, and sometimes they had tailwinds, sometimes they were facing headwinds, but they just kept swimming, right? It's very simple. Don't try to predict what's going to happen in the economy with these macro factors. Find businesses that you can understand that are promising, 10 years from now. Phil Town talks a lot about this. Find a business that's going to be worth a lot more that's going to be earning a lot more 10 years from now than it is today. And keep it simple. Keep it that simple. So that was the first part of the Q&A, which was the moderator really just asking questions to Charlie Munger. The second part is the alumni of CalTech asking, kind of submitting questions to Charlie. So let's dive into some of these. He was asked, have you ever made a mistake, investing? Charlie's like, of course I have. You wouldn't be sufficiently courageous if you didn't make any bad decisions / mistakes, okay? So you've really got to try things that you're not sure are going to work. And you learn from those mistakes. That's everybody. That's everybody's path. Anybody who's tasted success or done great things, like there's so much failure. And the key is learning from those failures, getting up and continuing on. He talks about how it's very common to be utterly brilliant and think your way smarter than you are, right? So the big problem in investing is not that people aren't smart enough. There's plenty of very smart people in the investing arena. The big problem comes when you have very smart people who think they're even smarter than they actually are. And that's when you do things that you shouldn't be doing, okay? Charlie talked about climate change, which was interesting. I don't think I've ever really heard him talk about climate change. Charlie's view on climate change: the worst that can happen in terms of global climate can be coped with by the advanced civilizations, which I guess he's including us in those advanced civilizations. If you had to erect seawalls to protect the entire U.S., it wouldn't take that much in terms of GDP per capita, and it could be done quite safely if we had to do it. And then he says he doesn't see that as a worse tragedy man can get. So that was interesting. Sounds like he's not losing too much sleep over climate change. Of course, he probably doesn't have a whole lot of runway left, being, I think, 96 years old. But it was an interesting perspective on climate change. He was asked, what do you see as the rates of return in equity over the next 10 years versus the previous 10 years? He says the next 10 years will offer lower returns than the previous 10 years. And he offers a few reasons for that. So many people are in it, and the frenzy is so great, right? Obviously, if you have a lot more people buying than you have in the past, it drives up prices, which reduces the expected return. The reward system of management are so foolish, right? That was another reason he gave for future returns likely being lower than past returns. He was asked about the combination of quantitative easing and large fiscal deficit. Where will that lead us? He said, that's one of the most interesting questions anybody could ask. And we're in very uncharted waters, okay? Nobody has gotten by with the kind of money printing we're doing now for a very extended period without some trouble. We're very near the edge of playing with fire, Charlie says. It's unbelievably extreme what's happening. So that was interesting to hear him say that as well. He was asked if the NASDAQ is in a bubble. He says, nobody knows when bubbles are going to blow up, right? So the whole concept of a bubble is that it's about to pop, right? But we have no idea what the timing on this is. He mentions Apple. Think what Apple is worth compared to Rockefeller's oil empire. It's been the most dramatic thing that has almost ever happened in the entire world history of finance. So, I don't know how big Rockefeller's oil empire was, relative to the economy at that time. But it seems like Charlie is alluding to the idea that Apple is just has a valuation that's not a valuation, a market cap, right? How it's being priced by the market is just extraordinary. He was asked about China, investing in China. He said he's invested very significantly in China through Li Lu, right? The Munger family put some capital with Li Lu very early on in Li Lu's investing career, and he's done very well with that money. Has had a very successful experience there in China, and thinks it's likely to continue. This is one thing I've really been wanting to find out more about what Li Lu is investing in China. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it's required to be disclosed publicly. So I have no idea. I think in the US, Li Lu has about 1.7 billion, but there's 12 billion that it seems like he's investing outside of the US based on the total assets under management for Himalaya Capital. And I have no idea what that money is being invested in. So hopefully at some point, we live in the information age, I can figure out, where some of that has been allocated. He was asked, can great investing be taught? Can you make a great investor of someone? He says, great investors are like great chess players. They were almost born to do it, right? So you have this intrinsic set of skills that are almost necessary in order to be a great active investor. Good investing requires a weird combination of patience and aggression, right? So you need to have the patience to wait for these rare, great opportunities to come along. And then when they do, you have to have the aggression to not just put a thimble out, right, when it's raining gold, but to, back up the truck and really seize that, opportunity that doesn't come along very often. And equally as important, you must know the edge of your own competency. You must know what you know and when you get into the territory of what you don't know. And really stay within that circle of competence, that area that you know. Hugely important. And finally he says, you find out if you have the qualities to win at poker by playing poker. He thinks, investing is similar. You find out if you're a good investor by trying it, by doing investing, and seeing how it turns out. Value investing, he's mentioned this many times. Value investing is something you get right away, like it just makes sense, or you never get it. It's not something that you can wrap your head around. He was asked, what are you proudest of? Okay. He says, this is a very Charlie Munger answer. Avoiding some things that I don't like. I don't like irrationality, and I've worked to try to avoid it in my life. I haven't succeeded, of course, but I've done better than I thought I would. And, by that measure, Charlie Munger sees that as a success. And then this is the last thing I want to share. Incredible quote, guys. Charlie's got some zingers. It's hard to be pretty smart if you're crazy leftist. You're going to have the world a lot wrong. So, so good. I know that one was floating around Twitter after this Q&A. As well as good investing requires a weird combination of patience and aggression. So anyway, guys, I just wanted to share some things that jumped out at me from Charlie Munger's Q&A session from December 14th, 2020. He doesn't do many of these, so I felt really fortunate to be able to kind of listen in live. And, you know, of course, I will post the entire Q&A in the description. I watched that as well, preparing for this highlights video. But it's well worth a watch. I think it's like 55 minutes or something like that. So anyway, guys, just wanted to share these nuggets of wisdom from Charlie Munger. Timeless wisdom, really. One of the greatest investors of all time, and still seems to be very sharp. Hopefully he's got a number of years left as, you know, one of the great capital allocators for one of the greatest companies in the U.S., Berkshire Hathaway. And with that, I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.